The research vessel Quantum Echo drifted through the darkness between galaxies, its sensors sweeping across the void for anything unusual. Captain stood on the bridge, her four eyes focused on the main display. The crew had been traveling for 3 months now, cataloging dead planets and empty space. It was boring work, but necessary. The Galactic Coalition needed maps of these outer regions. Doctor chirped from her station, her feathers rustling with confusion. "Captain, I'm detecting something odd." Turned her long neck toward the science officer. "Define odd." Designation 447 null. The rogue planet. I'm picking up a heat signature on the surface. The bridge fell silent. Every crew member knew about 447 null. It had been discovered 200 years ago and immediately classified as a dead zone. The planet had no star to orbit, no atmosphere worth mentioning, and surface temperatures that approached absolute zero. Nothing could survive there. Nothing should even try. "Instrument malfunction," said firmly. "Run a diagnostic." Talons clicked against her console. Minutes passed. Her crest flattened against her skull, a sign of deep concern among her species. "All systems functioning normally, Captain. The signature is still there, and it's not geological." "Explain." "It's moving. The heat pattern suggests something biological, something alive." Felt her blood chill. In her 20 years serving the Coalition, she had seen many strange things, but life on 447 null, that wasn't strange. That was impossible. The laws of physics didn't allow for it. She straightened her uniform and made a decision. "Deploy a probe. I want visual confirmation." The probe launched from the Quantum Echo's bay, streaking toward the planet's surface. The crew watched their screens in absolute silence. The probe entered the thin wisp of atmosphere and descended through clouds of frozen carbon dioxide. The surface came into view, a landscape of ice and rock that stretched endlessly in all directions. Nothing moved. Nothing lived. Then the probe's camera caught something that made no sense. A dome, translucent and shimmering, sitting on the barren surface like a soap bubble. Inside the dome, green plants grew under artificial lights. Equipment hummed and blinked with power. And standing in the middle of it all, wearing a patched and ancient-looking environmental suit, was a human. The human looked up at the probe, then waved. Made a sound like a strangled whistle. That's a human, on 447 null." "Impossible," muttered, though she was staring at the proof with her own eyes. Humans were a young species, newcomers to the Galactic Coalition. They came from a planet called Earth in the Sol system, and they had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. They were curious and friendly, but still learning the basics of galactic civilization. No human ship had ever traveled this far from their home. No human colony existed within 4,000 light-years of this position. Yet there one stood, apparently alive and well, on a planet where even extremophile bacteria should freeze instantly. "Scan for ships," ordered. "There must be a vessel nearby, a colony ship, something." The scans came back negative. No ships, no orbital stations, no signs of any technology except what was visible in that small dome on the surface. The human was alone. Made a decision that violated 3 separate protocols. "Prepare an away team. We're going down there." Her second officer, a named, stepped forward. His carapace clicked with agitation. "Captain, the regulations are clear. Unknown situations require." "I know the regulations. I also know that a member of a coalition species is somehow surviving in conditions that should kill them in seconds. We're investigating. Prepare the shuttle." 30 minutes later, descended toward the planet's surface with and 2 security officers. Through the shuttle's window, the dome grew larger. Up close, it was clearly made from salvaged materials. Pieces of hull plating formed the frame. Some kind of energy field created the barrier. Pipes and wires ran everywhere, held together with what looked like tape. The shuttle landed 50 meters from the dome. checked her environmental suit one more time before stepping out. The temperature reading on her wrist display showed -200 degrees. The atmosphere was mostly nitrogen with traces of methane. Could survive out here for perhaps 10 seconds before freezing solid. They approached the dome carefully. As they got closer, could see details that made her head hurt. The technology was wrong. Different systems that shouldn't work together were somehow functioning. A quantum battery connected to primitive chemical cells. A water recycler jury-rigged to a food synthesizer. Nothing followed proper engineering principles, yet everything was clearly operational. The human appeared at what looked like an airlock. She gestured for them to enter, hesitated, then nodded to her team. They stepped inside. The airlock cycled. Warm air rushed in. The inner door opened and the human removed her helmet. She was female with dark hair pulled back in a practical style. Her face showed lines of age and stress, but her eyes were bright and alive. She smiled. "Oh, thank God," the human said. "Visitors, I haven't spoken to anyone in years. Come in, come in. I was just making tea." Removed her own helmet slowly. The air inside the dome was breathable, warm, and smelled faintly of growing things. "You're human," she said, stating the obvious because her mind couldn't process anything more complex. "Doctor," the human said, extending her hand. It took a moment to remember that humans greeted each other by grasping hands. She reached out with her own three-fingered hand and completed the gesture. His grip was firm and warm. "Captain of the Research Corps, this is Dr. Our and officers and I've read about your species. You're the ones who discovered quantum folding, right? Brilliant work. Please sit. I know my furniture isn't designed for posture, but I've got cushions." Found herself sitting on what appeared to be a bench made from storage containers. Moved around her small living space with easy familiarity, preparing beverages with practiced efficiency. She acted as if having alien visitors in her impossible habitat was the most normal thing in the universe. Doctor began carefully, "How are you alive?" Laughed. The sound was startling in its genuine amusement. "You know, I asked myself that same question for the first year. Every morning I'd wake up and think, okay, today's the day the life support fails." But it didn't, and eventually I stopped asking and started living. "But this planet," said, her voice shaking slightly, "nothing can survive here, the temperature alone." "I know, trust me, I know." Handed them cups of something hot, sniffed it cautiously. It smelled pleasant. "I crashed here 17 years ago. My ship, the Magellan, was humanity's first attempt at experimental FTL. Something went wrong during the jump. Really wrong. I ended up here, which according to our navigation data should have been impossible. Half the crew died in the crash. The other half died within a week from injuries and exposure." 17 years, repeated softly. "Alone." "Alone," confirmed. She sipped her tea and gazed out through the dome at the frozen wasteland beyond. "I had supplies for 6 months. Standard protocol. 6 months and then a rescue ship would find us. Except no rescue ship came. No one could find us. I figured that out around month 4. "What did you do?" asked, leaning forward. "I survived. What else could I do?" Set down her cup and stood. "Come on, let me show you around. I'm actually pretty proud of this place." She led them through her habitat with obvious pride. Tried to catalog everything she saw, but each new system contradicted something she knew about basic physics. Had taken the wreckage of her ship and built something that shouldn't function. "This is my power system," explained, pointing to a humming device that looked like it had been assembled by a child. "The ship's fusion reactor was damaged beyond repair, so I stripped it for parts and built this. It's not efficient by coalition standards, I'm sure, but it works." Examined the device with her scanner, her crest standing straight up in shock. This is creating a perpetual energy loop. That's not possible, the entropy alone." "Yeah, I know it breaks some rules, but I didn't have time to worry about rules. I had about 3 days before my temporary shelter lost power, so I experimented." Shrugged. Human engineering is different, I guess. We're really good at making things work even when they shouldn't. They moved to the hydroponic garden. Plants grew in neat rows under full-spectrum lights. Tomatoes, lettuce, potatoes, and several varieties didn't recognize. Plucked a tomato and bit into it like fruit, juice running down her chin. The ship had seeds in long-term storage. Took me 2 years to figure out how to grow anything in this environment. The soil composition here is all wrong. Had to synthesize nutrients from the minerals I could mine. Lost a lot of plants to failure before I got it right. You synthesized nutrients, voice was faint, from base minerals, using what process? Trial and error mostly. I had the ship's damaged computer database, but it was missing huge chunks of data, so I filled in the blanks, gestured around her garden. It worked eventually. Felt something like awe creeping through her. This human, alone in impossible conditions, had not only survived but created a functioning habitat from nothing. They were masters of environmental engineering. They had terraformed dozens of worlds. But this was something else entirely. Doctor said slowly, you've been here 17 years, in isolation. That would drive most species mad. How have you maintained your mental health? Was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, but it was a different kind of smile, smaller, more tired. I won't lie, Captain. The first few years were hard, really hard. I talked to myself. I named the equipment. I cried a lot, but I also kept working. Humans need purpose. We need something to do, some goal to reach. So I gave myself goals, fix the power system, grow food, map the planet, and when I finished one goal, I set another. She led them to a terminal displaying a rough map. See this? I've been mapping the subsurface structure. This planet isn't natural. It's artificial, some kind of megastructure. I've found entrance points to interior chambers. I think this whole planet is actually a facility of some kind, built by a civilization that's long gone. You've been exploring it, asked, speaking for the first time. Of course, what else am I going to do? Watch the ice accumulate, grinned. Or I was before I became a crash survivor. This place is the discovery of a lifetime, maybe several lifetimes. Exchanged glances with. The eyes were wide with something between horror and admiration. They had come expecting to find a dying human, if they found anything at all. Instead, they had found someone who had turned certain death into an opportunity for discovery. Doctor said carefully, we can evacuate you, return you to Coalition space, to your family. I don't have family. My parents died before the Magellan launched. No siblings, no children. Looked around her small habitat, her expression soft. This is my home now, and my work isn't finished. Your work? Exploring the structure, understanding what this place is. Captain, I've barely scratched the surface in 17 years. There are chambers down there that could rewrite everything we know about ancient civilizations. I can't leave. Not yet. Felt her certainty waver. Every protocol said they should evacuate this human immediately. But seeing the determination in her eyes and the life she had built from nothing, understood something fundamental about humans that no report had ever captured. They didn't just survive, they chose to thrive, even when it should be impossible. I need to report this to the Coalition, said finally. They'll want to send a proper research team. That would be wonderful, said, her face lighting up. I'd love to have helped exploring this place, and honestly, having someone to talk to would be amazing. 17 years is a long time to go without a real conversation. As the away team prepared to return to their shuttle, walked them to the airlock, she handed a data chip. This has all my research notes, everything I've learned about the planet's structure and my survival methods. Share it with your scientists. Maybe it'll help someone else survive the impossible. Took the chip carefully. Doctor, I have to ask, why do humans do this? Push beyond what's survivable, beyond what's reasonable. Looked out at the frozen wasteland beyond her dome. For a long moment she was silent. Then she turned back with that characteristic human smile. Because giving up isn't in our nature, Captain. Because the universe is huge and full of mysteries, and we want to understand them. And because, she paused, choosing her words carefully, because someone has to prove that impossible just means nobody's done it yet. As the shuttle lifted off, watched the small dome grow smaller. Inside it, one human continued to live where no life should exist, and somehow, impossibly, she was thriving. The return journey to the quantum echo was silent. Each crew member was lost in their own thoughts about what they had witnessed. When they reached the ship, went directly to her ready room and began composing her report to Coalition Command. She wrote and rewrote the opening paragraph 5 times before settling on simple truth. We found one human where no life existed. She is alive, healthy, and refusing evacuation. Request immediate scientific support and guidance. She sent the report knowing it would cause chaos in the Coalition's bureaucracy. A human surviving on 447 null challenged everything they understood about environmental limits and species resilience. But that chaos, realized, was exactly what the Coalition needed. Sometimes the impossible just needed a human to make it possible. The response from Coalition Command arrived 6 hours later. Read it 3 times, each time becoming more concerned. The message was clear: quarantine the area, prevent any further contact with the human, and await the arrival of a full scientific fleet. Under no circumstances was Doctor to be left alone until proper evaluation could be conducted. The message was signed by the Coalition's High Science Council. 3 additional attachments detailed theories about how had survived. The theories ranged from advanced technology, she wasn't revealing, to the possibility that she wasn't actually human at all, but something else wearing a human form. Felt anger rise in her chest. She had met, spoken with her, seen the honest exhaustion in her eyes and the pride in her voice when she showed off her impossible gardens. That was no disguise. That was simply human. Captain entered the ready room, her feathers fluffed with agitation. I've been analyzing the data chip Doctor gave us. And it's revolutionary. Her notes on the perpetual energy system alone could advance our power technology by decades. The nutrient synthesis process she developed is more efficient than anything the Coalition currently uses. But Captain hesitated. The Council's response: they think she's hiding something, that no one could survive like that through skill alone. I know what they think, stood and paced her small office. They're wrong. I've read the human historical databases. This is what they do. They survive against impossible odds through stubbornness and creativity. It's their defining characteristic. Command wants us to extract her for evaluation. I'm aware. Will you follow orders? Considered the question. She had always followed orders, always trusted the Coalition's wisdom, but something about this situation felt wrong. Wasn't a threat. She was simply a scientist doing what scientists did under the worst possible circumstances. I'm going back down there, said. Alone this time, I need to understand something. Chirped in surprise. Captain, the orders were clear. The orders can wait 6 hours. I'll file it as a final evaluation before extraction. Grabbed her environmental suit. Monitor communications. If Command contacts us directly, stall them. You're risking your career. I'm doing my job. There's a difference. 2 hours later, stood in's habitat again. The human looked surprised to see her, but gestured for her to enter with the same easy hospitality as before. Captain, back so soon. Did you forget something? I need to ask you questions. Real questions. Sat on the makeshift bench. The Coalition Council received my report. They want to extract you for evaluation. They think you're hiding advanced technology or that you're not actually human. Laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Of course they do. Nobody can accept that a regular person might survive through pure stubbornness and duct tape. She poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to. What do you think, Captain? I think, said slowly, that I've been serving the Coalition for 20 years and I've never seen anything like what you've accomplished here. I think the Council is afraid because you represent something they don't understand, and I think they're making a mistake. So why come back? Because I need to understand, not for my report, for myself. Sip the tea. It was good, warming her from the inside. Why refuse rescue? Why stay in this place when you could return to your people? Was quiet for a long time. She walked to the dome's edge and pressed her hand against the translucent barrier. Beyond it, the frozen wasteland stretched endlessly. After the crash, after everyone else died, I spent 3 months sending distress signals. Every day, multiple times a day. I used every frequency I knew, and nothing, no response, no rescue. She turned back to. Do you know what that does to a person? The waiting, the hope that turns into despair. I can imagine. On day 93, I stopped sending the signal. I realized that nobody was coming. Either they couldn't find us or we were too far away for anyone to reach. And I had a choice. I could sit in the wreckage and wait to die, or I could try to live. Gestured around her habitat. So I tried to live, and you know what I discovered? Living is better than waiting for death. Working towards something, even something impossible, is better than giving up. I learned things about myself I never would have discovered on Earth. I became stronger, more capable, more certain of who I am. But alone, said softly, 17 years alone. Alone, yes, lonely, sometimes, but also free, smiled. Captain, I don't expect you to understand. Your species is different from mine. The value community and cooperation above all else. But humans, we're weird. We do our best work when we're pushed to our limits. We thrive on challenges that would break other species. The Council sees that as dangerous. The Council is afraid of what they don't understand. That's natural. But here's the thing, Captain, leaned forward, her eyes intense. I found something, down in the structure beneath this planet, something important. Felt her pulse quicken. What did you find? Come with me, I'll show you. Suited up quickly, moving with the efficiency of long practice. Followed her through the airlock and out into the brutal cold. They walked across the ice for 10 minutes before reaching what looked like a crack in the planet's surface. Produced a light and descended into the opening. The interior was unlike anything had seen. The walls were smooth and metallic, covered in patterns that might have been writing or decoration. The air was warmer here, though still far below freezing. Emergency lights flickered to life as they walked, responding to their presence. The structure extends for kilometers in every direction, explained, her voice echoing in her helmet. It's old, really old, millions of years maybe. I've found chambers filled with equipment I don't understand, but I also found this. She led into a massive chamber. The walls here were transparent, and behind them were countless cylindrical containers. Each container glowed with a soft blue light. Inside each one, suspended in some kind of stasis field, were biological samples. It's a seed vault, said quietly. A repository of life from across the galaxy, maybe across the universe. I've identified samples from over 1,000 species. Some match records in the Coalition database, some don't. Approached one of the containers. Inside was something that looked like an egg, preserved perfectly. This is impossible. How could anyone gather samples from so many species? I don't know, but Captain, I've been cross-referencing the samples with Coalition records. Several of them match extinct species, species that died out millions of years ago, and some pointed to a cluster of containers. Some match Coalition member species, including the implications crashed over like a wave. This structure, this facility, predated the Coalition by millions of years, and it contained genetic samples of species that wouldn't exist for eons after it was built. This changes everything, whispered. Now do you understand why I can't leave? Asked. This is the most important archaeological discovery in galactic history, and I'm the only one who knows it exists. Well, besides you now. They stood in silence, surrounded by the preserved echoes of a billion lives, felt the weight of the moment. Was right. This was bigger than one human survival story. This was a mystery that could reshape their understanding of the galaxy itself. The Coalition needs to know about this, said. I agree, but on one condition, turned to face her. I stay, I continue the research. I won't be extracted like some curiosity to be studied. I'm a scientist and this is my work. The Council won't agree to that. Then make them understand, Captain, you have influence. You have standing in the Coalition. Make them see that I'm not a threat, I'm an opportunity. Considered the request. It violated protocols. It went against direct orders, but it was also the right thing to do. Sometimes protocols needed to be challenged. I'll try, she said finally, but I can't promise anything. That's all I ask. They returned to the surface and habitat. As prepared to leave, touched her arm gently. Thank you for listening. Most people don't, you know. They hear what they expect to hear, see what they expect to see, but you actually paid attention. That means more than you know. Doctor, if I can't convince the Council, they will come for you. They'll extract you by force if necessary. His expression hardened. Let them try. I've survived 17 years in conditions that should have killed me. I've built a life from wreckage and impossibility. If they want me gone, they'll have to work for it. There was no bravado in her voice, just simple fact. Realized that would fight to stay, not out of stubbornness alone, but out of genuine conviction. This place, this impossible habitat on a dead planet, had become her home in a way that went beyond mere survival. I'll do everything I can, promised. Back on the Quantum Echo, composed a new report. This one was longer, more detailed, and included every image and recording from the structure beneath the planet. She explained discovery and argued for allowing her to continue her research under Coalition supervision rather than forcible extraction. She sent the report knowing it might end her career, but some things were more important than career advancement. Understanding was one of them. Respect for another being's choice was another. The response took 3 days to arrive. When it came, it was not what expected. Coalition Command agreed to establish a research station on designation 447 null. They would send a small team of scientists to work with Doctor in exploring the structure. She would be allowed to remain as the primary researcher, though she would be required to undergo regular medical evaluations and psychological assessments. The decision had been influenced, the message explained, by the data chip provided. Her research had already led to 3 major technological breakthroughs in Coalition labs. Her methods, while unorthodox, were clearly effective. And most importantly, her discovery of the seed vault had been confirmed by long-range scans. The structure's importance could not be overstated. Humanity, the message concluded, had proven themselves to be valuable members of the Coalition once again. Doctor would be granted full authority over the research station, with appropriate support and resources. Felt relief wash over her. She returned to the planet one final time to deliver the news in person. Cried when she heard, real tears streaming down her face as she laughed and thanked over and over. I can stay. I can actually stay and do the work properly, with help, with resources. The first support team arrives in 6 weeks, explained. They'll bring proper equipment, supplies, and personnel. You'll have assistants, other scientists to collaborate with. Other people to talk to, added, wiping her eyes. God, I didn't realize how much I missed that until just now. Don't get me wrong, I've managed alone, but having colleagues again, that's going to be amazing. As prepared to leave for the final time, walked her to the airlock. Captain, I need you to know something. You saved my life. Not from death, I was managing that on my own, but from isolation, from being forgotten. You listened when you could have dismissed me. You fought for me when it would have been easier to follow orders. Thank you. felt warmth spread through her chest. "You saved yourself, Doctor. I just made sure the rest of the galaxy noticed." "Still, thank you." They clasped hands one final time, human and connected by mutual respect and the strange circumstances that had brought them together. As the quantum echo departed from the system, logged a final entry in her personal journal. She wrote about the human she had found where no life should exist, about the strength it took to survive alone for 17 years, about the discoveries waiting to be made in the ancient structure beneath a dead planet. But mostly she wrote about what humanity represented to the Galactic Coalition. They were the newcomers, yes, the young species still finding their place among the stars, but they brought something precious with them. They brought the absolute refusal to accept defeat, the ability to look at impossible circumstances and find a way forward anyway. That quality, realized, was exactly what the Coalition needed, not just in survival situations but in everything. The willingness to try when others would give up, the creativity to find solutions where others saw only problems, the stubborn determination to keep pushing forward no matter what obstacles appeared. One human had survived where no life should exist, and in doing so, she had shown the entire galaxy what humanity meant. Smiled as she gazed out at the stars. The universe was vast and full of impossibilities, but with humans in it, maybe those impossibilities were just challenges waiting to be overcome. 6 months later, Station was officially inaugurated. The research facility sprawled across the surface of the planet now designated as 1, though everyone still called it 447 null out of habit. 12 scientists from 6 different coalition species worked alongside, exploring the structure and cataloging its contents. Doctor had volunteered to join the team. She stood now in the main laboratory, studying a sample that had been carefully extracted from one of the containers. "These genetic markers are fascinating. The preservation method is unlike anything we've developed." Looked up from her own workstation, her face showing the kind of tiredness that came from too much excitement rather than too much hardship. "I've been thinking about that. What if the preservation method is adaptive? What if it adjusts based on the specific requirements of each sample? That would require computational power beyond anything we've created. Or it's just really old technology that had millions of years to be perfected." Grinned. "We keep thinking about this place in terms of our current capabilities, but whoever built this was working on a completely different level." Chirped in agreement. Over the past months, she had developed a deep respect for the human scientist. The methods were chaotic and sometimes made no sense, but they produced results. She approached problems from angles that never occurred to coalition scientists. It was frustrating and fascinating in equal measure. The station now included proper housing, multiple laboratories, a working cafeteria, and even recreational facilities. Had her own quarters, though she still spent most of her time in her original habitat. She claimed it felt more like home. Commander, the station's administrative officer, entered the lab carrying a data pad. The moved with precise efficiency. "Doctor, we've received a communication from Earth. Your people have heard about your discovery. They're calling you a hero." Snorted. "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who was too stubborn to die." "You're both," said firmly. "Your survival story has inspired humans across the coalition. Applications to the program have increased by 300%. Your species is eager to explore and discover." "That sounds like humans," saved her work and stretched. "We're a curious bunch, sometimes dangerously so." The past 6 months had been productive beyond anyone's expectations. The team had explored 50% of the structure's accessible areas and cataloged over 10,000 biological samples. They had found technology that would take decades to understand fully, and they had discovered something else: messages. The structure's builders had left information encoded in the walls themselves. The messages were fragmentary and difficult to translate, but they told a story of a civilization that had reached across time and space to preserve life itself. They called themselves the Preservers, and they had created thousands of facilities like this one throughout the universe. Each facility was a seed vault, a library of life that could survive any catastrophe. The Preservers knew their own civilization was ending, but they refused to let all life end with them. So they built these monuments to persistence, these declarations that life would continue even after they were gone. Found the story deeply moving. It mirrored her own experience in a way. The Preservers had faced impossible odds and responded not by giving up but by ensuring something would survive. They had chosen hope over despair. She shared these thoughts with the team during one of their regular meetings. We're not just studying an ancient facility. We're learning from the Preservers' example. They showed us that survival isn't just about individual persistence. It's about making sure life itself continues. Clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. An admirable philosophy, though one might argue it shows a certain stubbornness. Says the species that terraformed 17 planets against all economic sense, shot back with a grin. Stubbornness is universal, Commander. We just express it differently. The meeting dissolved into laughter. It was a sound that would have seemed impossible a year ago, laughter echoing through a facility on a dead planet. But now it was normal. Life had found a way to exist here, just as the Preservers had intended. Later that evening, stood in her original habitat, now preserved as a historical site. She walked through the garden she had built by hand, touching the leaves of plants that shouldn't exist in this environment. This place represented something important. It was proof that impossible was just a word. Captain visited regularly, checking on the station's progress and bringing supplies from Coalition space. She arrived that evening and found in her old habitat. "Still sentimental about this place?" asked. "Always. This is where I learned who I really was, where I proved to myself that I could survive anything." Plucked a tomato and handed it to. "Try it. These are the descendants of the first plants I grew here. Each generation has adapted to the conditions better than the last." Bit into the tomato cautiously. It was sweet and tangy, bursting with flavor. "It's excellent. Life adapts. Given time and pressure, it finds a way to thrive. That's what the Preservers understood. That's what I learned here." They walked through the habitat together, two very different beings brought together by circumstance. Had been promoted to research coordinator for the sector, largely because of her handling of the situation. She had proven that sometimes the right decision meant breaking the rules. "The Coalition Council has made a decision about the Preserver facilities," said. "They're going to search for others. Your discovery has opened up an entirely new field of research. They estimate there may be thousands of these structures scattered across the universe. Thousands of libraries of life. Thousands of messages from a civilization that refused to let everything end." Smiled. "I hope we find them all, and I hope we learn the lessons the Preservers tried to teach us." "What lessons are those?" "That life is precious, that survival is worth fighting for, that even when everything seems hopeless, there's always a way forward if you're willing to work for it." Looked out at the wasteland beyond the dome. The Preservers could have given up when they knew their civilization was ending. Instead, they built something that would outlast them by millions of years. That's not just impressive engineering, that's hope made physical. Was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You've become something of a symbol, you know, among humans and other species, the one who survived the impossible." "I know, it's weird. I didn't do anything special, I just refused to quit." "That's exactly what makes you special. Most beings, when faced with certain death, would accept it. You chose to fight. You chose to live. And in doing so,